Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming back after lunch. Normally, post-lunch sessions are the most sleepy. So I thought what I'll do is I'll wake you up with a photo of a surgery. I don't know if this works. So just to, but be warned that this is a well-selected. So this is a surgery I was doing around 18 years ago now. So that's an endoscope going deep into the brain of a patient to evacuate the blood clot over there. And the reason I put this is that I'm a neurosurgeon who's dealt with natural intelligence, standing here in a conference on artificial intelligence. And I do think there is a link between both of them. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But after being a neurosurgeon, I think I had the privilege of working with McKinsey. And somewhere in 2008-9 timeframe, we published one of the first reports on what we then called mHealth, mobile healthcare. And please note that the phone in that is a BlackBerry. iPhone had not come even when this report came out. And then I had another privilege while I was the CEO of Manipal Hospitals to to be a part of a team that brought, along with IBM, Watson for Oncology into Asia for the first time. In fact, this was, I think, the second installation of Watson for Oncology in the world. And after this, China got it, South Korea got it, and then there were a bunch of others as well. So I've had a journey which has given me a good exposure to healthcare, and which is what we're going to talk about. But for the last 10 to 15 years or so, my fundamental belief has been that the way healthcare is done today is almost the way it was done 500 years ago, and it is ready for disruption. And it is these set of technologies that we're going to talk about, which are going to fundamentally change the way healthcare is done, right? But before going there, let's talk about this whole intelligence stuff. What is intelligence? Because everybody claims everything is artificial intelligence, and some of those claims are artificial. I think you should recognize that. And if you want to spend time on this, I can go deeper in this discussion later. But I think the 2 points I want to make from this slide. First of all, the dirty secret of intelligence is that almost 80 to 90% of your intelligence is social. It's not your individual excellence that matters. You can take an average individual from an average society, put him in a society or a company or a community where all the other cultural aspects are there, and that person will shine. So I think in our country, we put too much emphasis on individual excellence. I got the highest marks, I got the highest grades, I was a topper. I think that is less predictor of your success than the social context, the culture, your ability to collaborate with others, your ability to communicate. But let's park that aside. I think within the individual part, there are 2 or 3 aspects of intelligence which are truly human, right? So there is some amount of symbolic representation. There are languages in other animals. There are some amount of pattern recognitions happen. Your dog recognizes you. There is emotions in dogs and cats. But there are things like goal setting. For a PV Sindhu to win the world championship, that goal was set for her almost 20 years ago when probably she was 5 years old. And just think of a human being who spends 20 years of her life pursuing that goal every day, 12 hours a day. And that's true for every Olympic gold medalist. And that's true for every one of you, I think. People have been engineers, people have become doctors. All of these things take decade-long goals. And we are the only living organism which can set that goal. And to date, there is not a single non-human intelligence that can do this. And I would even argue that for all of you who are designing artificial intelligences, please make sure that the AI never gets the ability to set a goal. That is a way that Skynet won't happen. Because the day the AI can set a goal, and in fact I was reading yesterday, there are some missiles which can now hunt for their own targets. And I would argue that is very dangerous. Because you don't want to give an artificial intelligence the capability to select its goal and pursue it, because then you don't have control over what it's doing. But again, a long topic, we'll discuss that offline if necessary. But the one point I wanted to make from this side of the slide is what is being given as artificial intelligence, what is being spoken of as artificial intelligence, is mainly the ability to learn and do some problem solving. And that's not trivial. In fact, there are certain features of that that are very unique and that I want to talk about. First of all, this learning and problem solving can happen at very high processing speeds. which is fine. Computing has achieved that for almost 20, 30 years. But I think the two new things which are truly unique of the newer versions of AI is that they can crunch massive data sets. They can go into billions of data points that most of us can't. And an even more powerful capability is that for an algorithm to work with 1,000,000 dimensions is as difficult as to work with 2. I don't know about you, but after I see a 2 by 2 graph and you make a third dimension, it becomes really difficult to understand what's happening. And we can't even imagine a graph in the fourth dimension. But I know many of you can design algorithms that can deal with a few thousand dimensions, no extra sweat. And I think that's a really powerful capability, which humans will never have. And hence, we should exploit it as a complement to our intelligence rather than as something to be afraid of. And as a result of all of this, we have had amazing performance on many different aspects. But this is another very important part, the last two parts. And AI does not have an ego. We all do. Is there anybody who does not have an ego? I would like to meet that person separately. I think we all have an ego, right? And that ego becomes our obstacle towards further learning. Because we think, oh, we already know so much. We don't want to learn anymore. We were just hearing a brilliant talk on learning. Why should I learn? And AI will never ask its data scientist, why should I learn? Right? Because it's just designed to learn. And the other thing is, hard fact, but all of us die. Right? It's true. There are people who spend 50 years becoming very experienced doctors, brilliant at making decisions. But we can't keep them alive. They will die. And so on and so forth for professors and engineers and judges and even politicians. And AI, once it is created, can be kept alive forever. It'll never forget, and it keeps learning. And for me, that's also a very unique capability. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Yes, an AI will get replaced by a better algorithm. That's fine. But that's evolution. That's evolution, and that's OK. But it doesn't have to die. We have to die. And that's something that we must keep in mind as we design some of these solutions. OK? So now, shifting gears away from intelligence into what is happening. So the field of medicine, as I said, is stuck in a 500-year-old model. Basically, what the model says is, if any one of you has a problem, and you come to me and say, Doc, you are a neurosurgeon, help me. I'll say, OK, come to my hospital, take an appointment, wait for some time. I will ask you a few questions, and I will do some tests, and I'll give you a diagnosis and a treatment. That's the model. That was the exact same model 400 years ago. That has not changed. Yeah? But what has changed is our understanding of anatomy, our understanding of physiology, pathology, diagnostics, medications, all the other devices that go into the ICU and operation theater, our ability to transplant your liver, transplant your heart, transplant your lung, all of that is there. So this famous article in New England Journal of Medicine a couple of years ago, 2017, from two professors of Harvard, says this sentence, that the complexity of medicine now exceeds the capacity of the human mind. And this is actually true. Because if you just do a search for how many papers were published in a peer-reviewed journal, it's more than a few thousand a day. And no human doctor, even if you remove the basic science papers, you remove all the molecular stuff, even then, there are several thousand papers a day that a doctor is supposed to know if he is confidently telling you that, yes, I am giving you the best. And that is not possible, right? So these doctors, Obermeyer and Lee, they were candid enough to say that there is little doubt that algorithms will transform the thinking underlying medicine. The only question is whether it happens from within or without. And although this was published, I don't think many doctors or many healthcare professionals have truly internalized what this means, because they don't understand a lot of what you guys do. And hence, this cross-conversation between healthcare and the tech field is very important, which is part of what we are trying to do. There have been a lot of significant advances in various aspects of medicine. I won't do a full review of that because I think that's available on Google. Any of you can just type in latest in AI in healthcare, you will get this. But I think the 2 or 3 areas that stand out, one is the area which involves images, radiology, dermatology, pathology. These are 3 areas where you deal with images. And convolutional neural networks have become so advanced that in all these 3 areas, they're actually now doing better than the doctors. For most part, not completely, because going back to my second slide on intelligence, there is still judgment required. There is still weighing of pros and cons that AI can't do. But things like image recognition, AI can do far better than a human pathologist or a human, to some extent, radiologist. We are not fully there yet, but given the trends of improvement, there is concern that many of these medical specialties will be eliminated. There is another area which BuddhiMed is working on, is dealing with large amounts of text data and using natural language processing to bring some of that and make sense of that. And I'll talk about that in the BuddhiMed context. But at a more broader level, I think this is the one page that I wanted to spend some time on. So how do you do AI in healthcare? And this is something that I personally have struggled with. I'm a natural intelligence surgeon. I'm not an AI surgeon. But my co-founder, Rohit, he's sitting here. He is a PhD in computer science. And he and I have a lot of these debates of how do we merge the two fields of computer science and modern medicine. So I think the first question that any one of you have to ask who wants to work in this space is, where is the data? You can't do anything in AI with data. And I had to have that journey. I wanted to do some of this stuff in my earlier roles, both in Max as well as in Manipal. But the data that they had was either too small or it was sitting in unstructured format with no capability to pull it out. And to be honest, this field of NLP has also evolved over the last 3-4 years. We just heard a talk yesterday saying that 2018 was the turning point of the NLP technology. So I think things have improved. Second, you do need various different techniques, tools, solutions, technologies to take that data and bring it into simple Excel type mean, median, standard deviations that are also very powerful, by the way, or more advanced techniques like all the fancy terms that you use, KNN models and all of that. And then, of course, finally, the deep learning predictive models, or even the non-deep learning predictive models, which is also kind of a known entity. All of you know how to do that. But then what use do you put it? And that is not easy. Because when I set up a data science team in Manipal, my team member who was also a PhD in com science, she asked me, so what do you want to predict? And at that time, I actually could not articulate that answer very well. You can predict all sorts of things, but you want to predict something that is useful and will actually either have a clinical benefit or a business benefit, or both, which is typically the case. So while this is fine, I think the one hint I will give to any one of you who wants to work in this space is to build use cases, go after a fundamental phenomena of healthcare, which is called information asymmetry. Do all of you understand? How many of you understand what is information asymmetry? I can talk about it. Okay, just 10%. Okay. So information asymmetry means, I'll give an example. You come to me with a headache. Your knowledge of your situation is X. And after I've done your tests, as your doctor, my knowledge of your situation is 100X. Why? Because I know the anatomy of your head, I know the structure of your brain, I know the vasculature. From the symptoms that you tell me, I can do a pattern recognition and say, this looks like migraine. From the MRI, I know how to read the MRI. I know how to treat which medicines work, which don't work, and if they work, at what dosages do they work, and what. So there is a huge body of knowledge that is sitting in my head. And that is information asymmetry. If you know X, then I know 100X as your doctor. And this is not because I'm Ajay, this is true for any doctor, right? That is a source of attack for any business model. Because information asymmetry leads to inefficiencies and also extortion of power. So a doctor may say, you must get an MRI done, whereas data may say an MRI was not needed, right? Or if you bring an MRI back with a small hyperintense shadow, the doctor may say, oh my God, this is a brain tumor, I need to operate on you. And the real data will say, no, this is just a calcified nodule. Post-surgery, the doctor may say, look, I've done a brilliant surgery, I saved your life. And you will be so grateful to this doctor. But actually, he has done something criminal on you. So that is the source of information asymmetry causing a lot of problems. So any business model that you can construct to remove this information asymmetry will be very helpful. Another example could be, you ask me, Ajay, you are a neurosurgeon. Who's the best neurosurgeon in Pune? right? And I get asked this question 5 times a week. And actually, I can't answer that question with data. But sitting somewhere in the data is the volumes, the outcomes, the complications, the cost of all the surgeries done in Pune. And that can answer the question, right? There is another information asymmetry, which is an even bigger source of revenue if you wanted to go after it, which is going back to the X and 100X, right? So if I know X about my disease, my insurer knows X by 100 about me. And I can lie to my insurance company and say, no, I have nothing, I am fine. I'm just a healthy young male, and give me an insurance policy. And lo and behold, 1 year later, it turns out that I have diabetes, I have history of coronary artery disease, and I also have a ureteric colic, which needs a lithotripsy. So that is also another source of inefficiency, as well as, I won't call it corruption, but cheating, you might call it. When you're lying to your insurance company, you're cheating the insurance company. And there is a lot of business models that can be constructed around that. There is a third source of information asymmetry between a pharmaceutical manufacturer and the doctor. What is being manufactured in what factory? Is that FDA approved? Are you actually putting APIs, or are you putting some salt? Does the medicine even work? Yes, there is US FDA, yes, there is Indian regulators who go and do the inspections, but it's a huge source of information asymmetry. So that's another model that can be built. And all of this will be informed by data, which has gone through the stuff that I talked about. You'll need to crunch it, you'll need to build data models, you'll need to have outputs. Okay? So I spent a lot of time on this. So that's kind of what we are trying to do, and this report we were very privileged that this FICCI report talked about us. Basically, we're trying to build standardized vocabulary, etc. I'll just show this chart, actually. This is a better. I'll just go through it in 2 more slides, and then we are done. So this IT architecture applies to probably every hospital, every insurance company, every TPA in the country. I don't know about non-healthcare, but probably it also applies to non-healthcare. This is designed to support high volume transactions, right? And I've run hospitals like this. In this hospital, if I was to ask my CIO, give me a list of all the knee replacements and what were their costs in my network of 11 hospitals, it'll take him a month to give me that answer. Because a knee replacement is written differently in Salem, differently in Vijayawada, differently in this one. He needs a doctor to go through that list, and the costs are written differently. So a simple question like, give me a list of all the knee replacements in the last 6 months and their cost cannot come out of this system. And that's a fundamental problem. And that's the core of what we are trying to do in BuddhiMed. We are just taking the same data and building a longitudinal record on one individual. So this is that same data. If you have had 3 episodes, or even if in 1 episode you have had a 1-month stay, this chart will tell you hour by hour, day by day, month on month, what happened to you. And this is inspired by Dr. Eric Topol and his concept of Homo Digitus. And this is a very powerful concept that he has popularized. Eric Topol is a very famous cardiologist. He works in Scripps near La Jolla. So the point is, all of us are human living flesh and blood, but now we have the opportunity to create the Homo Digitus, which is us represented in the digital space. And that then becomes the raw material for all those algorithms and learning models that we talked about. So this is something we have started to do. For the non-tech people to whom we talk about, we show this. I think to this audience, ETL is like ABC to you. So we do extraction, transformation, and loading, and there is a central common data model that we take our data into. But we very quickly realized that while the patient database is fine, we also need to know who the doctors are. And in India, there is no uniform directory of all the doctors. In the US, all my friends are in the US who are doctors. There is something called UPI, Universal Physician Identifier. And everybody has one number. It's a 9-digit number. And I can just pick up the doctor from that number. In India, it does not exist. MCI does not have it. State medical councils don't have it. We are now building it. Of course, the new National Digital Health Blueprint is talking about it, and we are even talking to the Health Stack group, and we are working with them. So we have a database of 8 lakh doctors. We think there are around 9 or 10 lakh doctors in India, and we are creating a cleaned up, non-duplicated, updated database with a uniform identifier. Because that also allows us to take this patient data and build doctor profiles. Then you know who are the neurosurgeons in Pune who are doing how much and at what cost and with what outcomes. So you start building those insights. Similarly, we are building a hospital database, an insurer database. This is all stuff in the public domain. This is all there. We are not hacking anybody or we are not buying this stuff. This is all in the public domain. But we are structuring it, we are cleaning it, and Rohit's teams are painstakingly building MySQL models and all sorts of things to get this to a place where this is usable. And where will this take us? So these are just the last 2 slides. Our prediction is that in the next few years, most decision-making in medicine will be augmented by AI algorithms. And I'm carefully saying decision-making. Yes, there is robotics in surgery, but I think the development of robotics is at least 10 years behind. And I don't envisage a day when I will allow a robot to do an endoscopy on me. On the other hand, I know that if tomorrow, God forbid, I am in the ICU for septicemia, I want an AI algorithm which is trained on ICU patients to look at everything that's happening to me, my creatinine, my LFT on an hourly basis, my ventilator PTO2. There's so much of data in the ICU. And not even the best intensivists in the world can take control of that data. Why is that not being analyzed, compared with other patients like me, and the doctor being told that this guy is going to have a renal shutdown in the next 24 hours? And by the way, that's the algorithm that Google has come out with. You must have seen it. Google has just published that algorithm. It's a very cool thing. They can predict 48 hours in advance that your kidney is going to shut down. And you can already prevent it. And that's just 1 out of 1,000 applications. I'm asking, why can't this group of people in this room build similar predictions using our data? And we will encourage and, in fact, love to have collaboration with all of you to build those algorithms. So I think that's point number 1. I think the point number 2 is, this is where the NEJM's prophecy is going to come true. The way doctors work today is this. This is what I was saying is a 400-year-old business model. The way it's going to work even 12 to 18 months from now, once our system is ready, is your symptoms will go to an EHR database, and we have millions of patient records already. It will be compared. It will be very diligently analyzed. Even categorizations will be made. So I'll give you an example. Diabetes is one name, but diabetes is 5 different diseases. One diabetic goes into a retinopathy, another one goes into a nephropathy, third one gets a silent MI. They're all HbA1c more than 8. So how do you know which one is going to be which? Our sense is that we can build predictive models to say, this is the roadmap you're on, Mr. Diabetic, and this is what's going to happen to you 3 years from now. And these are 2 things you need to do to get off that trajectory. And that's possible, right? So that's something that will happen in the next, this is not 5 years away, this is 2 years away. And this is 2 years away in India. This won't, by the way, this stuff won't happen in California. This is not going to happen in California. This I learned when I was in McKinsey, I was publishing those reports. There are 3 big obstacles in California or anywhere. By California, I mean the Western society. Obstacle number 1 is the regulatory obstacle. US FDA will have a huge hurdle to look at it. Obstacle number 2 is who will pay for it. Medicare has another set of hurdles to start paying for it. Obstacle number 3, there are lawyers waiting for you to go wrong and then attack you. And those lawsuits will run into tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. In India, we are fortunate. I mean, it's a sad thing that our healthcare is paid out of pocket. So that's not the fortunate part, but the fortunate part is Indian doctors are smarter and entrepreneurial. Indian patients are wanting to have a better outcome for the 1 or 2 lakh rupees that they're spending. And there is a lot of willingness to try some of these things. And Indian government also, I will compliment, in all the recent publications that Niti Aayog has put out, that this NHA is putting out, they are saying that Indian data is Indian intellectual property. It has to be used for improving Indian people's lives. And the other unique thing about Indian data that they are talking about, which I totally agree with, it is owned by the patient. This is not true in the US. It is very unclear who owns your data. Cerner thinks they own, the hospital thinks they own, the insurance company thinks they own. The one who does not own is the patient. I don't know if you are aware. You can't get your medical reports in the US. You can't get hold of them. They will not give it to you. Right? In India, that's not true. So I think this stuff is going to happen in India, and we will be delighted to be a part of it. And finally, that prediction model that I was talking about, we will not be treated as he is a nephrotic syndrome or he is a coronary artery disease. We'll be treated as this guy is this age, this gender, he has this disease with this molecular problem. And by the way, there are 5,000 other people with exactly the same problem, and that was their trajectory. And hence, instead of giving antibiotic X, he should get antibiotic Y. That is personalized medicine. And that is not very far. Because yes, Rohit is an expert on genomics, and again, that's another long topic. Genomics defining your phenotype and your pathology is a long journey. And we both agree it's going to take 10, 15 years before it comes to mainstream. But even without genomics, you know my liver function test, you know that I metabolize phenytoin differently from you. That's there in the liver function test. Why is that information not given to my doctor? Right? That's personalized medicine. And then so on and so forth about allergies, about responsiveness. I don't know if you're aware, a lot of oncology trials are done on male white patients or female white patients. Therefore, Roche and Genentech have found out that many of these drugs don't work on blacks. And vice versa, some of them work wonderfully on blacks and don't work on white, but they were rejected in trials since the majority of the trial population was white. So I think there is a lot of nuance in bringing this personalized information, personalized medicine to us. And I think our average age is around 35, 40 in this room. All of us will need this, all of us will have this by the time we are on that ICU bed 30 years from now. So, and let us work towards making sure that we are not treated as a label, which is what hospitals do today, a label of a CAD or a MI, but we are treated as the customer segment of one who has these problems and who will respond to those issues. Last slide. This is just last week's Economist. The worldwide, there are 35 companies that are working in data analytics. They're unicorns. And their total valuation is already 73 billion, of which the top 6 already account for around 42 billion. So a lot of success of startups is to be in the right place at the right time. And we feel that this is the right place at the right time, where not only are the raw materials of data, technology, talent, capital are there, but also the receptiveness from society is there. Actually, there is demand that we come up with some of these solutions. So thank you very much. Happy to take some more questions. That's my last slide. And if any one of you want to give us suggestions or ideas, happy to continue the dialogue with you.
Please keep it brief, please.
Yeah, Dr. Bakshi, fascinating talk. Interesting to know this work is being done in India. You mentioned Google, right? Just like that, IBM invested a lot in Watson for doing exactly this, and they failed to a large extent. What are the learnings from that in terms of the AI usage in this technology?
Great question. So I interacted with IBM very closely. In fact, Ms. Jenny Rometty came to India to launch this thing that I talked about. So I think they made two fundamental mistakes, which they've corrected now, but it's still a misstep, or rather not a mistake. I think the first misstep was that in the marketing euphoria, they went out to say that this will replace the doctor. Right? And first of all, that was not true. And secondly, no medication or no drug or no device comes into the market without the doctor's approval. So it's almost like you are telling your customer that we are going to replace the customer. So it's not going to happen. So I think they misunderstood that the customer was the patient, but actually the customer is either the doctor or the payer. So I think that was one problem. And the second problem was evidence. How do you know it works? Right? And that is actually true for all AI stuff. Doctors are used to 10, 15-year-long clinical trials. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, toxicity studies, what if this did not work? So they're used to that data. Medtronic gives us that data. Boston Scientific gives us that data. Pfizer gives us that data. IBM had nothing. IBM said, this technology is cool. It's based on this Watson, which won the Jeopardy, and therefore, please use it. So I think then, of course, they went back and they hired a lot of people from the medtech industry. But on a positive note, what I have learned and what I think all of us should take away is that Watson is still a very powerful tool. And my oncologist, I mean, not my oncologist, but I was working for them rather, they, in Manipal, they used to say, almost like, this is boring, we know what it's going to say. And I said, okay, if this is boring for you, you are a super specialist oncologist. What if I was to send this to Salem, where there is no oncologist? And then they were like, a dying moment, yeah, that will be great for Salem, because at least it will filter those patients who need some basic care for a very standard, say, breast cancer, right? So I think there's lots to learn from what happened in IBM. I also think there's been a lot of negative press, which was a bit overreaction. When you go one way, then the forces go the other way. Overall, I think IBM has contributed positively to the field of bringing AI to the mainstream of healthcare. And a lot of other people are also now working on that space.
Okay, time's up, so you'll have to take the question off stage.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Big round of applause.